My wife said she was going to work. That sentence used to mean something solid. Predictable. Safe. It meant a travel mug half full of burnt coffee, her heels clicking twice on the tile by the door, a quick kiss that smelled like peppermint gum. It meant she'd be back around 7, complaining about guests, tips, or the way the hotel's new management didn't understand people. That Tuesday, it meant none of that. It meant I was about to learn how quiet betrayal can be, and how loud it gets once you really listen. I'm 47 years old. At the time, I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona. Suburban calm. Beige walls. HOAs that cared more about mailbox height than human happiness. I worked in commercial insurance audits. Boring enough that nobody ever suspects you're paying attention. My wife, Laura, was a senior operations manager at a luxury resort just off Camelback Road. 5-star place. Conferences, weddings, CEOs with fake smiles and real expense accounts. We'd been married for 18 years. No kids. 2 dogs. A routine so smooth it felt bulletproof. Looking back, that should have scared me. The first crack showed up as an email. Not a dramatic one. No subject line screaming, "Your life is a lie." Just a notification from our joint bank account while I was reheating leftover chili. Transfer pending. $48,900. I remember squinting at my phone like it had personally offended me. That wasn't grocery money. That wasn't oops. I fat-fingered the rent. That was almost exactly half of what we kept liquid at any time. And it was marked external transfer. I texted her. "Hey, did you move money from savings?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. At work. Can't talk. It's for something I told you about. She hadn't told me about anything. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I stood there, chili cooling, microwave still humming like an idiot, thinking, okay, breathe. There's a reasonable explanation. There's always a reasonable explanation right up until there isn't. I checked our account history. That's when the math stopped adding up. Over the past 6 months, there were deposits I didn't recognize. Always neat. Always just under $10,000. Always labeled as consulting reimbursement or vendor adjustment. I do audits for a living. If this had been a client, I would have circled it in red and written "explain this" like I'm 5 in the margins. I sat down at the kitchen table. Same table where we'd signed refinance papers. Same table where we'd argued about paint colors and laughed about how neither of us understood TikTok. The numbers told a different story. By my rough count, very rough because my hands were shaking, we were looking at over $400,000 in unexplained inflows. And now nearly $50,000 flowing out. I didn't feel angry yet. That came later. First came confusion. Then the slow, cold feeling you get when you realize you're not in on your own life. I drove to the hotel. I didn't storm in. I didn't demand answers. I parked across the street like a creep in a rental car stakeout scene. The sun was setting, turning the glass facade gold. Valet cars glided in and out. Everything looked expensive and clean. Laura's car wasn't there. I checked her location. She'd turned that off, for privacy, a year ago. I hadn't pushed. Marriage is about trust, right? Snorts. That's when a memory surfaced. One I'd ignored because it didn't fit the picture. About 8 months earlier, she'd mentioned a new colleague. Mark. Finance director. Divorced. Brilliant with systems, she'd said. Knows how to move money where it needs to go. At the time, I joked, sounds dangerous. She'd laughed a little too fast. I went home and opened my laptop, pulled public records, then LinkedIn, then the hotel's press releases. Mark's name popped up everywhere once I started looking. Oversaw vendor contracts, payment reconciliations, internal audits, control without spotlight, the best place to steal anything. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there listening to the dogs breathe, replaying little moments like a bad highlight reel. Laura paying off her car early. Laura suggesting we remodel the guest bathroom, just because. Laura insisting we keep finances simple and discouraging me from looking too closely. Around 3 a.m., I did what I should have done immediately. I opened a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, descriptions, patterns. By sunrise, My hands were steady again. My brain had shifted gears. Emotion was still there. Hurt, disbelief, a dull ache in my chest. But something else had joined the party. Focus. When Laura came home at 9:30 a.m., she looked exhausted. Mascara smudged. Hair pulled back like she'd been running fingers through it all night. Rough shift? I asked. She froze. Just for a fraction of a second. Long enough. Yeah, she said. You wouldn't believe it. I smiled. A small one. The kind you use when you're buying time. Oh, I said. I think I would. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just an affair or a lie or even a betrayal of the heart. This was financial, strategic, planned. And whatever she'd taken from that hotel, whatever they'd taken, it was already far bigger than our marriage. That's where my story really begins. I didn't confront her. Not then. That surprises people when I tell this story. They expect shouting, plates breaking, dramatic ultimatums. But confrontation is a luxury you can only afford when you already know the truth. I didn't, not fully. And instincts honed over 20 years in audits told me one thing loud and clear. If money is moving, someone is watching it. And if you spook them, they'll vanish. So I played dumb. For the next 2 weeks, I became the best version of the husband she thought she had. Asked about her day. Cooked dinner. Nodded at stories about system upgrades and vendor chaos. I even joked about taking a vacation once things calmed down. Inside, though, I was tearing the walls open, one stud at a time. Every night after she fell asleep, I was back at the spreadsheet. I synced our bank data with CSV files, flagged patterns, cross-referenced dates with hotel events, conferences, weddings, large vendor payouts. It was always the same rhythm. Big event, inflated vendor invoice, adjustment, clean deposit into our account. The numbers escalated fast once I zoomed out. By month 10, it wasn't hundreds of thousands. It was 7 figures. I remember leaning back in my chair and laughing once. A dry, humorless sound. Snorts, because if you don't laugh at that point, you scream. The real punch came when I followed the outgoing transfers. They didn't go to shopping sprees or offshore havens like you'd see in bad movies. They went to Shell LLCs in Nevada. 2 of them. Both formed within weeks of each other. Both listing the same registered agent. And both with Mark's fingerprints all over them. Flashbacks started making sense then. Laura suddenly too busy for dinners. Laura guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. Laura telling me, gently but firmly, that I didn't need to worry about her side of the finances anymore. I wasn't just betrayed emotionally. I'd been recruited, without consent, into a laundering operation. That realization hit different. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was danger. I called in sick one Friday and drove to Phoenix to meet Evan, an old college friend who'd gone the opposite direction from me. White-collar crimes unit. Arizona AG's office. We hadn't spoken in years, but I still had his number. We met at a diner that smelled like burnt bacon and old coffee. Perfect place for ugly truths. I slid my phone across the table. I think my wife is stealing from her employer, I said. And I think it's north of $2 million. He didn't laugh. Didn't ask if I was joking. He scrolled in silence for a long minute. Then he said, "You didn't come to me first." "No," I said. "I came to you careful." That earned me a look. Half respect, half pity. He explained the basics, slowly, like he was talking to someone standing on thin ice. If I confronted her without proof, she could destroy evidence. If I reported her prematurely, I could implicate myself through the joint account. If I moved money without documentation, I'd look complicit. "Right now," he said, tapping the table. "You're a witness. Keep it that way." He gave me 2 names before we left. A forensic accountant, and a lawyer who specialized in financial crimes and divorce. "Pick one first," Evan said. "But you'll need both." I picked the accountant. Her name was Janice. Late 50s. Sharp eyes. No nonsense tone. Charged $400 an hour and worth every penny. She didn't ask about my feelings. She asked for data. Bank statements. Tax returns. Emails. Anything with numbers. 3 sessions later, She leaned back in her chair and she typed a few keys, turned the screen toward me. $2.03 million. My stomach dropped. Not because of the number, but because I recognized the timeline. That was about when Laura started talking about us less and I more. Janice explained the mechanism. Vendor padding. Fake reconciliation errors. Mark handled the back end. Laura approved adjustments. Internal controls bypassed because everyone trusted them. They didn't think anyone would look this closely, Janice said. I did, I replied. She nodded. Auditors always do. Eventually, the lawyer came next. Michael. Calm. Expensive suit. Voice like a seatbelt clicking into place. He laid out my options like chess moves. Divorce first. Freeze assets, protect myself. Criminal complaint. Leverage but risky. Wait and document. Slow but devastating. What do you want? He asked. I thought about Laura laughing in our kitchen. About the nights she'd said she was working late while wiring stolen money. About Mark's name popping up like a ghost behind every transaction. I want out, I said. Clean. Legal. And I want the truth documented so thoroughly no one can lie their way around it. Michael smiled. Not warmly. Professionally. Then don't rush, he said. Let them hang themselves a little longer. So I waited. I collected emails from the shared iPad she forgot existed. I logged times she said she was at work, while transaction logs showed activity elsewhere. I watched as the amounts got bolder. Sloppier. The double betrayal became clear then. Not just Laura choosing another man, but choosing money and power over the quiet life we'd built. She didn't want love. She wanted control. And she thought she had it. By the time I was ready to move, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't angry. I was precise. That's when I started planning the end. The plan didn't feel dramatic while I was building it. That surprised me. You'd think revenge would come with adrenaline, heart racing, blood pounding, some cinematic moment where everything explodes at once. Instead, it felt like assembling furniture. Step by step. Calm. A little tedious. And oddly satisfying when things started to fit. Michael called it controlled exposure. I called it letting gravity do the work. The key was timing. The hotel's fiscal year ended June 30th. That meant internal audits, external auditors, bonus calculations, and executive reviews all piled on top of each other. If something ugly surfaced then, it wouldn't be quietly buried. It would be showcased. So I waited. I kept playing my role. Still the trusting husband. Still the guy who didn't do numbers outside his job. Still the man Laura thought she was 3 moves ahead of. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks before the end of the fiscal year, Mark made a mistake. Greed always demands a curtain call. He authorized a vendor adjustment just over $250,000. Too big, too fast, too visible. And he routed it through one of the shell LLCs Janice had already flagged. Janice called me within an hour. They're rushing, she said. Something spooked them. I knew what it was. The hotel had announced a surprise acquisition. New ownership meant new eyes. New CFO. New auditors who didn't owe anyone favors. Laura came home that night buzzing with nervous energy. Talking too much. Drinking wine too fast. Things are changing at work, she said casually. Might get messy for a bit. I nodded. Messy how? She shrugged. You know, politics. I almost laughed. Snorts. That night, while she slept, I sent Michael the final packet. It was beautiful in a horrifying way. Transaction logs. Email chains. Approval workflows. Bank records. A clean narrative showing who initiated, who approved, who benefited. I didn't send it to the police. I sent it to the hotel's external audit firm. Along with one sentence. I believe this may be relevant to your upcoming review. The dominoes didn't fall immediately. They tilted. First came the internal freeze. Laura mentioned it offhandedly over breakfast. IT locked some accounts, she said. Temporary. Then came the late nights. Real ones this time. Not affairs. Damage control. By Friday, Mark's name disappeared from Laura's stories. He's out sick, she said once. He's on leave, she said later. They're restructuring, she said after that. Each version contradicted the last. The confrontation, if you can call it that, didn't happen at home. It happened without me present. On June 28th, the hotel's board called an emergency meeting. External auditors presented their findings. Vendor fraud, internal collusion, over $2 million unaccounted for. Mark cracked first. That part one only learned later through Evan. When faced with prison math instead of spreadsheet math, he folded. Gave them everything. Emails, messages, approval trails, including Laura's. At 3:42 p.m., Laura called me from a number I didn't recognize. Something's wrong, she said. Her voice was small, stripped of authority. I looked at the clock, took a breath. What's wrong? I asked. They're asking questions. About money. About approvals. I kept my voice even. And they mentioned the bank. Our bank. Silence stretched between us. Thick, heavy. I could have ended it then. Confessed. Exploded. Thrown the truth in her face like a brick. I didn't. Get a lawyer, I said. Now. There it was, the first real crack in her control. You knew, she whispered. I know how numbers work, I replied. That's not the same thing. She didn't come home that night. The next morning, Michael filed for divorce. Same day, the hotel terminated Laura for gross misconduct. Not quietly, not politely. Her name was scrubbed from the website by noon. By Monday, subpoenas followed. Mark was arrested first. White-collar guys always are. Easier to isolate. Easier to flip. Laura wasn't cuffed. Not yet. But the investigation named her as a primary co-conspirator. Her accounts were frozen, including ours. Here's the twist people don't expect. I wasn't ruined by that. Michael had prepared for it. Weeks earlier, we'd legally separated finances. Documented my lack of involvement. Established timelines showing when deposits began. After Laura had insisted on handling things herself. By the time the state moved, I was legally insulated. Emotionally, though, that part still hurt. She showed up at the house once. Unannounced. Hollow-eyed. Smaller somehow. I never meant to hurt you, she said, standing in the doorway like a stranger. I didn't invite her in. You meant to benefit, I said. That's different, she cried. Said Mark manipulated her. Said it started small. Said she was going to tell me once it was safe. I believed part of that. I just didn't care anymore. The law did the rest. The strange thing about explosions, legal or otherwise, is how quiet it gets afterward. No music. No victory speech. Just paperwork, waiting rooms, and the slow redistribution of consequences. Laura's case moved faster than I expected and slower than I wanted. That's how the system works. It doesn't rush for emotions. It grinds for accuracy. Mark went first. He took a plea deal within 6 weeks. 1 count of wire fraud. 1 count of conspiracy. 10 years recommended. Assets seized. Cooperation clause thick enough to choke on. Evan told me Mark looked relieved when it was over. Like someone finally took the weight off his chest and replaced it with bars and schedules. Laura held out longer. She hired a sharp attorney. Tried to paint herself as a middle manager following instructions. A victim of a manipulative superior. The classic I just signed what they put in front of me defense. Janice dismantled that in an afternoon. Approval timestamps. Override logs. Emails where Laura didn't just approve. She suggested ways to hide discrepancies. Cleaner language. Smaller chunks. Timing things around holidays. Intent. Spelled out in 12-point calibri. The prosecution didn't need my testimony, but they wanted it. Michael asked me if I was sure. Do you want to sit across from her? He said. Answer questions about your marriage? I thought about it for a night. Then I said yes. Not for revenge. For clarity. When I took the stand, Laura didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands folded like she was waiting for a dentist to call her name. I answered questions the way I do audits. Calm. Factual. No adjectives unless asked for. Did I authorize the transfers? No. Did I benefit knowingly? No. When did I become suspicious? Date. She was convicted on multiple counts. Sentenced to 8 years. Eligible for parole after 5 with good behavior. Restitution ordered, though everyone knew most of the money was gone. The hotel recovered some. Insurance covered the rest. Life went on. As for the supporting cast, 2 junior accountants were fired. Not charged, just careless, not criminal. 1 vendor faced penalties for willful ignorance. Another paid a settlement so large it shut them down. Collateral damage. That's what they call it. The divorce finalized 3 months later. No dramatic courtroom showdown. No last-minute confessions. Just signatures and stamps and a judge who'd seen this story enough times to keep her voice neutral. I kept the house. Not because I wanted it, but because selling it felt like letting the past dictate one more thing. The dogs stayed with me. The joint account was split after forensic tracing. I walked away whole. Not enriched. Not punished. Just intact. People ask me if that felt like winning. Didn't. Winning implies competition. This felt like containment. For a while, life felt hollow. Not sad, empty. Like a room after movers leave. You keep expecting noise that doesn't come. I changed routines. Started running early mornings. Volunteered with a financial literacy group on weekends. I stopped telling the story unless asked directly. Dark humor crept in sometimes. When friends complained about their spouses hiding Amazon packages, I'd smile and say, "At least it's not a felony." Snorts. Time did its thing. The anger burned out first. Then the curiosity. Eventually even the why lost its edge. What remained was something quieter. Perspective. I realized I hadn't been stupid. I'd been trusting. There's a difference. One is a flaw. The other is a risk. And risks don't always mean mistakes. Laura wrote me a letter from prison once. For pages. Apologies mixed with justifications. Regret tangled with self-pity. She said she wished she'd chosen differently. I believed her. I just didn't respond. Because by then, my life wasn't about her choices anymore. It was about mine. It's been 3 years now. I live in a smaller place, still in Arizona, but closer to the mountains. Fewer walls. Fewer rooms filled with echoes. I wake up early, drink my coffee black, and watch the light crawl over the rocks like it's thinking things through. My life isn't exciting. And that's the point. For a long time after everything ended, I kept waiting for the aftershock. The moment where regret would sneak up on me and ask if I should have handled it differently. If I should have confronted her sooner. If I should have screamed, cried, broken something, made it feel like betrayal is supposed to feel. That moment never came. Instead, something else settled in. Clarity. I learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with lipstick on a collar or a phone buzzing at midnight. Sometimes it shows up as spreadsheets that don't balance. As confidence where there should be caution. As someone slowly moving from we to me while you're still speaking in plurals. The hardest part wasn't losing my wife. It was losing the future I thought was already written. That version of my life died quietly, no funeral, no goodbye. Just a series of realizations stacked on top of each other until the weight became undeniable. People love to talk about revenge like it's a fireball. Fast, hot, destructive. But real revenge, the kind that actually works, is cold, boring, and disciplined. It's restraint. It's choosing not to confront when confrontation would only make you feel powerful for 5 minutes and cost you everything for 5 years. It's documentation instead of drama. Silence instead of shouting. Lawyers instead of threats. I didn't ruin Laura's life. She did that herself. I just stepped out of the blast radius. That distinction matters more than people think. I've replayed our marriage enough times to know this wasn't one bad decision. It was a series of small ones, each justified, each easier than the last. She didn't wake up one day and decide to steal $2 million. She woke up one day and decided she deserved more than consequences. That's a dangerous belief. Mark believed it too. So did everyone who looked the other way because the numbers mostly worked. Self-interest has a way of turning accomplices invisible in their own minds. As for me, I learned that being passive and being patient are not the same thing. Passivity is letting things happen to you because you're afraid of conflict. Patience is letting things unfold because you're preparing to act correctly. I wasn't weak for waiting. I was strategic. That lesson changed how I move through the world now. I read contracts twice. I trust people, but I verify systems. I don't confuse love with blindness anymore. And I don't chase revenge. I prioritize self-preservation. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's walking away intact, with your name clean, your conscience clear, and your future still yours to design. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Laura in a concrete room, lights out at 10, living on schedules she doesn't control. I don't feel satisfaction. I don't feel pity either. I feel distance. And distance is freedom. If there's a moral here, and I think there is, it's this: when betrayal happens, your first impulse will be emotional. That's human. But your best move will almost always be rational. Pause, observe, document, plan, then act once, cleanly. Cold revenge through law and truth doesn't make for flashy stories in the moment. But it ages well, like good whiskey, like silence after chaos, like a life reclaimed. That's mine now, quiet, ordinary.
Undeniably mine.